Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your client's peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to Legacy Leaders. I'm your co-host, Chuck Gore, and today I'm talking with Nathan Gordon. He's a shareholder with Baker Donaldson in the Birmingham, Alabama office. Nathan, good morning. Thanks for being on.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm excited to talk to you today. So tell me, first off, why law school? Why did you want to go to law school?
I'm probably a little unique in that I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I went to law school. I went to law school with the plan to do transactional work, estate planning, corporate work, a degree in accounting. So I knew going in, this is why I'm going to law school. I want to be an estate planner in transactional work. And the reason for that is really that I'm from a smaller town where a lot of people own timberland and family farms and that kind of thing. And so it was drilled into me from a young age. This is back in the 90s when the estate tax exemption was about 600,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was drilled into me. If you want to keep your property, you've got to do some estate planning. Otherwise, you could be in a situation where you have to sell your property upon a family member's death. And so I had that in the back of my mind from a young age, and that was always intriguing to me. And so that kind of led me down the path of going to law school and wanting to be in this world of estate planning and really corporate work too, because they dovetail together in a lot of respects.
That makes sense. That kind of answers my second question a little bit. Why did you want to get into the estate planning field? Because you have a unique professional background from what I found. So how does the estate planning, how does that fit into your practice?
Yeah, you're right. The reason I chose estate planning probably is because of my background growing up and hearing about family members and other people that just didn't have a will in place or an estate plan and bad things happening. And so I didn't want that to happen to me, number one. So I wanted to go to law school to learn about it and also to help other people. And that's been one of the reasons that I've wanted to do it. And like I said, I enjoy helping people with not only the estate planning. A lot of people have small businesses, and there's an issue with how do we transfer this business owned to the next generation. And so that was always something that I wanted to help. I like working with businesses. My undergraduate degree was in accounting. So I've had this business background, and I've always liked business and entrepreneurship and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's probably why I chose this field.
That's great. Yeah, I haven't met a lot of attorneys that also were CPAs.
Yeah, so it's a lot of school. Let me say that.
I can imagine.
I went through and got my accounting degree, and then part of our program was to take the CPA exam. So I ended up getting my master's and took the CPA exam, and then decided to go to law school. So it was a lot of tests and a lot of school. Here I am.
I got you. I understand. Well, how did you get to the firm you're at now?
So I started out in law school, worked at more of a boutique estate planning firm, a smaller firm. I really enjoyed that work. And then when I graduated, I ended up working at more of a mid-sized firm, still doing estate planning and corporate work. And then that firm actually went under. It went out of business, which you just don't see very often with law firms, but it went out of business. And I was fortunate enough, a lot of those attorneys went over to this firm. So I came with them as a young associate, and I've been here for about 10 years now.
Okay. So you enjoy where you're at now?
I do. I like it. We're a big firm, but here in Birmingham, we're only about 60 attorneys or so. So it feels more like a smaller to mid-sized firm in a lot of respects.
Okay. Very good. In your practice, can you describe what one of your ideal clients would look like? I know everybody's unique, but
Yeah, I would say my ideal client and who I really enjoy working with are business owners that have a small to mid-sized business. Maybe they've been in this business. Maybe their father passed it down to them.
Mhm.
They've been in this business for years, and now they've reached a point where they have to figure out, what am I going to do? Am I going to pass this on to my kids? Do we want to sell the business? What's our ultimate plan here? And everybody has different considerations. Maybe there's a kid that's involved in the business. Maybe one kid doesn't want to be involved in the business. And so you have to work and think of creative solutions for how this is going to work. Maybe no kids want to be in the business and we decide to sell the company. And so I think those are the people that I enjoy working with the most. But I also, I don't know if I have an ideal client, because those are people that I like working with, but I also work with just your everyday Joes who don't run a business, because everybody needs a will and
Right.
everybody needs to have a plan in place. Even if you have very minimal assets, you still need to have a plan and a will and a power of attorney and an advance directive for healthcare and all those things to avoid just a disastrous result for your family and huge headaches. So I don't know if I have an ideal client, but I'd say it's probably the average Joes and the business owners.
Okay. Because any plan is better than no plan.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Right. Any plan is better than no plan. Well, you touched on this a little bit earlier, and just expand on that a little bit with the common issues that you see. I know you talked about the will and the succession planning. Those are important that everybody needs to address, correct?
Yeah, I would say that's probably the most common issue is if you own a business, and you've been working in it for years, what's your ultimate end game? That's a very common issue for business owners is do you want to sell? Do you want to pass it on to your kids? And that can present a whole host of different issues. Maybe the owner wants to maintain control and pass on a portion of the business to his kids so that they can at least have some income from the business. And there's ways to do that. There's also sometimes you may have an outside family member that's part of the business, and you need to have some type of buy sell in place to buy out that person so that it can pass on to your heirs. And those are complex. Those are slightly more complex issues that I deal with. I guess the spectrum is the really complex issues that we deal with would be more of the estate tax issues. And that just because the exemption is so high for a married couple now, it's over $24 million. That just doesn't affect a lot of people. So if you are dealing with that, it can be complicated, and there's a whole lot of things to plan for the taxes. These are super high wealth individuals. So I don't deal with that as much because the exemption is so high. So the most common thing I deal with is probably just ordinary wills, basic estate planning issues, people that may have a child with maybe special needs or some addiction issues, and they need a trust, because the last thing you want is for somebody to pass away and a child with addiction issues or special needs to inherit a bunch of money and then it just goes away.
Right.
So those are some common issues that are just not really tax driven or wealth transfer driven, but just more life driven, those are just common issues that I see almost every day.
And I think too, you can touch on this better than I can, but when you're talking about the continuation and with the children that might have some unique circumstances, a lot of families and don't want to talk about it. And it's difficult for them, so you're not only are you helping them, but you're being a counselor for them, and just because these are things that they have to address.
Yeah, and you're right. Sometimes you have to pull it out of people
Right.
and make them see the issue. People will sometimes mention things like that to me in passing. Oh, I've got a son. He's been in rehab a few times, and I have to say, okay, let's think about this. Let's stop and take a step back and really think about that. Do you really want what age do you think that it would be appropriate for him to inherit a sum of money or be a part of the business? And that it can be a fluid process. I tell people all the time, if you do your will today, Doesn't mean it have to stay that way for your whole life. Things change, situations change. Every 3 to 5 years, people should be reviewing their plan to look over it and make sure it still makes sense for their situation.
Right. I know when it comes to estate planning, all people are always say, well, that's just a bunch of rich kids fighting over money. Yeah. What kind of common misconceptions do you run into often?
Yeah, that's one that you talk about is people think that it's just for rich people that, oh, I don't need an estate plan. That's just for super wealthy. But everybody needs an estate plan. I think you said when did things go wrong? Is that what you said? Or
Yeah, just tell us a story that if you know of a situation where things didn't go right. They
yeah,
didn't do any planning, or they didn't necessarily follow your advice so much, and it turned bad, because I've seen a lot in
yeah.
my business.
Unfortunately, the situations like that I see most often are when people die. Nobody's ever expecting to die. And it's an unfortunate situation when something happens and somebody dies and they didn't have a plan in place. And that can just create really a headache for family members. I had a situation one time where the father of a minor child passed away, didn't have a will in place. And if you don't have a will in place, the intestacy laws govern. So that means that half of his estate went to his spouse and the other half went to his minor child. And it was a significant amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And we really prefer to have a trust in place for that child rather than having it under a minor's account where it's
Right.
just under the control of Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account. So we had to kind of creatively come up with a way to do a trust for that child, have it approved by the court. The court the trustee and the administrator had to have a bond issued by the court, which was really expensive because it's based on the amount of money in the estate and in the trust. So all of those issues could have been easily resolved with a will, because when you have a will, you can waive bond. And we ended up having to pay $20,000 or $30,000 for a bond that was really pointless. It's just $20,000 or $30,000 that just went out the window for no reason. And if he had spent $1,000 on a will, his family would have saved $30,000.
Right.
And so I see that another situation. Now that's one that comes up from time to time. I've had other situations where more complex situations where there's some estate tax involved. I had one where this was probably over $100 million estate, super wealthy family, and we were doing some estate planning. And then right in the middle of the estate plan, the patriarch of the family just passed away suddenly. And he was planning to make gifts to his children to get some of his assets out of his estate. But once he passed away, we couldn't do that. So his plan wasn't, we weren't able to carry his plan through to fruition. And it just really, it wasn't disastrous, but it could have been a lot better for the family if we had been able to plan better. And that's one where I wish we could have been in his ear earlier and just explain, look, we really need to do this, because sometimes it's hard to get people to focus on that.
Right.
So
that's what I hear most often, is the ones that are bad. The attorney is having to go in and fix things that should have been addressed before. And if instead of having to fix everything, if they would have just taken the time and done their preparation and got their plan together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there seems to be, there's, I could probably sit here for 2 hours and tell you stories of times when things like that have happened. It's just, I think sometimes people are afraid of spending too much money on the front end with an attorney, but ultimately they end up wasting 10 times that amount because something comes up unexpected. If they had just planned for it ahead of time, it would have saved their family thousands of dollars.
Yeah. And that previous example would have saved him at least 30,000.
That's right.
If not more. So
yeah.
We've talked about some that have gone wrong. Tell us about some that have gone right.
Yeah, they do go right sometimes. I've got one right now that it's a family business. They've been in business for generations, and the patriarch of the family is ready to to move on to something else, and he wanted to pass on some of his ownership to his children. So we did a recapitalization of the business. He wanted to maintain control, but he didn't need the income at this point in his life. So we were able to separate the business into more of a control and then an economic interest. And so he still controls the business, but his children are able to receive the benefits. And they also, it's now out of his estate. A lot of the economics are out of his estate. So if the business continues to grow, that growth will now be in the children's estate rather than his estate.
Right.
And so that's a really successful plan where the family as a whole is going to save on estate taxes. He's able to give his kids some income during their lifetime. He can still be in control of the business because he knows best. He's been in it for 40 years and knows the business, but he can also allow his kids to slowly work their way into the business. That's one. I like doing those where we plan ahead of time. We've got everything set up right. It's really about peace of mind. And I can't tell you how many times people come into my office and they say, "Oh, we've been putting this off." It's just a simple will. They may just need a simple will, and they've been putting it off and putting it off, and we finally do it, and they say, "Oh, it feels like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. So glad to get this done." And those are just great moments, I think, for people to be done with it. And a lot of times they don't have to think about it ever again. They may be to a point where that's all they need is that one will, and we don't have to change it. If they're good for the rest of their life, I would still look at it every now and then and make sure. And so that peace of mind is just invaluable to a lot of people. I've also helped. This is a good idea that I've done this on 2 different occasions where I've had clients that owned businesses and they had so much peace of mind from their own estate plan that they wanted their employees to have that same peace of mind.
Wow. Yeah.
So they set up a kind of a benefit plan where they said, "We'll provide estate planning for our employees." And so they would send their employees to me, the company would pay for it, and we would do an estate plan for as many of the employees as they wanted. And all those employees, I can tell you, they were so grateful for that because number one, a lot of times people don't know who to call. They don't know who to trust. They're worried how much it's going to cost. So when these employers did that, it just took all that away, and their employees, they almost all of them participated and were able to get estate plans in place. And I've done that 2 different times for companies, and it worked out great for everybody.
That's a fabulous idea. And I know exactly what you're talking about when the peace of mind that you give your clients, because you can physically see it when that relief just leaves them, knowing that these things are done. And
yeah, and
peace of mind and just relief, and you can physically see the stress leaving their body.
That's right. And a lot of times people want to leave, even if it's just a small legacy, even if it's just an heirloom or something that they've been trying to make sure that it passes on to this person. And once they have it in writing and in a will, that peace of mind is huge. And I tell you, a lot of times the peace of mind comes because people are going out of town and they're worried that something's going to happen when they're on a trip. And so they say, "Oh, I've got to get my will in place so that I can go on this trip." And then they get that peace of mind from having that. And now they can go enjoy their vacation.
They can enjoy their vacation and the trip.
Yeah. Right.
What are some of the biggest challenges you face, Nathan?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest challenges is trying to get people to focus on their estate plan, because it seems like the only time they can focus on it is right before a vacation. And I get a phone call the day before and they say, "Oh, I'm leaving town tomorrow." And I say, "That's a little bit tight. I don't know if we can get it done in less than a day." But I had a friend one time call me from he was leaving to go on a cruise, and he said, "I realized I don't have my will in place. So what do I need to do? I can't get on this cruise until I have a will in place, or I just want to enjoy it." And I was like, "If you're in the parking lot right now, there's not a whole lot you can do.
Right.
I think he hand wrote out something to give himself peace of mind. But yeah, I think the biggest challenge is getting people to focus on it. Nobody wants to think about their death, and
Right.
these things are not fun to talk about. They're hard issues a lot of times. Another hard issue for people this holds up the entire estate plan sometimes is the guardianship. In your will, you can list, if you have minor children, you can list who you would like to be as the guardian if something happens to both you and your spouse. And a lot of times people just cannot decide who should be the guardian. Should it be the husband's sister? Should it be the wife's sister?
Right.
And I tell people all the time, don't let that hold up your plan, because number one, it's a very unlikely event. And then number two, it's still the court has to approve a guardianship proceeding. So even if we put it in the will and for some reason Sister B decides that Sister A is just unfit, something has happened, the court can ultimately make a decision and the kids will be taken care of. I can promise you that. And you may be better off if you can't decide, just don't put anything in the will. And then somebody will step up in your family and solve the problem. I can promise you that. I think probably the biggest challenge is just getting people to really focus in on their estate plan one day before they leave on vacation.
Right. So if you could get everybody's vacation schedule for the year, then that would be
Yes.
good. That way you could
Exactly.
make sure, hey, we got to get this done before you leave for Paris next month. That's great, Nathan. And I know we touched on this, but just again, what do you like best about the estate planning?
I've always liked puzzles, finding creative solutions to problems, and in a lot of ways, it's one big puzzle. People come and they say, "Here's all my issues. Here's my list of 5 issues. I've got one kid that is in rehab. I've got one kid that wants to be in the business. I've got another kid that's only 7 years old. Oh, and by the way, all of those kids are from a previous marriage, and I've got another kid with a new wife. Mm-hmm. And how do we provide for all this?" And you have to think creatively, and a lot of times, because the common person doesn't really understand all of the issues involved with estate taxes, with trusts. And so they present their issues to you. And then I have to sit back and think, how does this fit in? What can we do to really reach their goal? So in a lot of ways, it is like a puzzle. And I have a lot of people that will tell me, they'll call me and they'll say, I need a trust. And I'll say, okay, why do you need a trust? Right. And then they can't really tell me. They're like, well, I think I just need a trust. But there's 1,000 different reasons why you might need a trust. And I would say 9 times out of 10, by the end of the conversation, they say, actually, I don't think I need a trust. I think I just need a will. So I enjoy the challenge of trying to find a solution that meets the goals for clients.
Right. Well, very good. Nathan, tell everybody where they can find you and how they get in touch with you.
Yeah, so I'm in Birmingham at the Baker Donaldson office. You can look me up on the website, call my office. They'll patch you into my direct line. And I'm usually downtown. I'm not one of the remote workers at this point. Although I do work remotely every now and then. So I'm usually in downtown Birmingham. And if I'm not in Birmingham, I'm probably going to be in South Alabama, down near the coast.
Gotcha.
Doing something outdoors. So
I understand. Very good. Thanks for being on today, Nathan. I've really enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it as well.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.